Welcome, everyone, to the Information's TITV. My name is Akash Pasricha. It is Wednesday, September 24th. We have got a big guest with us here today. Hemant Taneja is the CEO of Catalyst. He is here coming on in just a minute, so do not go anywhere. You do not want to miss that conversation. We've also got our friends at Atlassian coming on for a discussion about why individuals are getting value out of AI, but teams are not, at least not to the same extent. It's going to be a great show, so let's get right on into our first guest. Catalyst is one of the most storied firms in all of venture capital, and Hemant Taneja has helped steer the company for much of its 20-year history. He has also been the CEO of the firm for nearly 5 years now. The company's portfolio has included Stripe, Circle, Anduril, Canva, and Mistral. I want to bring on Hemant to talk about this moment for the AI sector and how his company has evolved over the years. Hemant, welcome to TITV. It's great to have you here.
It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So, look, there's a lot to get to. I want to sort of start with a bit of my confusion about the current state of the AI sector. And one of the things that you've said time and time again is that we are peak ambiguity right now. And, on this show, we try to make sense of the ambiguity, make things a little less ambiguous. And so hopefully you can help us do that. I want to start with a column that our executive editor wrote last night. Martin Pierce, he wrote saying that, Sam Altman put out this blog post saying, the growth of AI services has been astonishing. Okay. And that's the first part of the story. But then on the flip side, you have, a lot of commentary around how businesses are not seeing the value from AI as they would have hoped, not the least of which is that MIT study. And so you kind of have these two different sides of the story. And I'm hoping you can help us reconcile these two things.
Yeah. Look, you have to think about what it's going to take to create diffusion of AI in the enterprise. Let's work backwards from that, okay? For an enterprise to really effectively use AI, you have to have four things in my view. One is you need to make sure your data infrastructure is ready for AI. That's a complex problem, doesn't get solved overnight. Remember, the whole transformer zeitgeist only happened a couple of years ago. You also need to have models trained on your data, and so they're applicable to your secret sauce, if you will. And the last thing is you have to think about workforce transformation because you're going to have agents, AI agents and humans in your workforce now. And some agents are managing the humans, some humans are managing the AI agents. And so it's like a whole transformation. And the last thing is you need leadership at the top that's got the courage to drive that diffusion of AI. So a lot of what you see in the MIT study and others is, these companies take a shot at trialing one of the language models. They can see what's the art of the possible, but then they get stuck. And they get stuck because it's actually a place where you have to have all four of these ingredients to really drive diffusion.
So you're saying that businesses need all four things, and perhaps that's why they're not seeing the value. The other part of the story that was kind of interesting is there was a report from Bain that came out yesterday that talked about the extent to which businesses would need to spend more on IT services to justify the capital expenditures that these cloud companies and AI companies are spending to invest in capacity and compute. And the takeaway from the report, it was quite interesting, was that they're not projecting enough revenue growth to justify that capital expenditures. So how do you think about that if that's the case?
Look, I think the equation becomes hard if you think about the market size in the context of software budgets of companies, and that's really what you're going after. But if you start to think about the fact that the ultimate revenue opportunity is the labor budgets of these companies, that's when it really starts to make sense because if these models are going to actually effectively diffuse in the enterprises, they're going to take a lot of the labor content of it. Now you're talking about a much, much bigger market in terms of what is going to create profitability around these staggering numbers. I do agree with these numbers are so large, but the belief here really is that the budgets we're going after ultimately is going to be around labor, which obviously creates a whole other set of issues that I've talked about a bunch. But that's where this is headed.
Okay, and so when you say labor market, say more about that. What exactly do you mean by that?
I mean, so take all the innovations in the coding market, Claude and other products. Are you really going after what is the software tooling budget for developers, or are you going after how much you spend on developers as a company, right? So the market size in terms of what your revenue opportunities when you're providing those products is 100 times bigger. Let's say you spend 1% of somebody's salary on their tooling.
Okay.
You're actually going after that 100% because as these models get better, you're starting with entry level engineers all the way to over time, what we think of as 10x engineers. These AI models are going to be able to do it,
Right.
and so that's your TAM. And so now all of a sudden the justification for how much infrastructure you're going to spend to create this market starts to make sense. Obviously, there's a big leap in there that these companies are truly going to diffuse these technologies, but the raw potential in terms of scope is there
Okay.
eventually.
But then what happens to the labor itself? Or what happens to the people that were doing these jobs in the first place?
I mean, there you go. I mean, a really interesting thought experiment that one of the CEOs of consulting companies you would know told me is a client asked them, "How do we go from 50,000 employees today to 100,000 in 5 years, but only 10,000 of them are humans?" And so I do think companies that effectively diffuse AI into their overall operations will be market leading and will have fewer people than they do today. And that is where the budget opens up to subsidize the staggering compute infrastructure investment that we're talking about.
So, I want to come back in a little bit to General Catalyst and sort of the strategy you guys have, but very quickly on that note, you guys are about 300 people right now at the firm.
A little over that. Yeah.
Where do you think you'll be 3 years from now in terms of headcount?
It's very hard to say, but I mean, I'll tell you, we are fully replatforming ourselves to be AI native. There's a massive initiative inside the company, and as I think about our priorities for next year, I'm pushing every part of our organization to say, why do we need to hire more? How do we get more out of making our teams do the interesting work and take a lot of the sort of boring or entry level work and have the models do? And we're early in our journey, but I'm hopeful that we will definitely bend the curve of how much we have to hire to do our business. Now, ours is sort of a unique business. It's not what most of the enterprises look like.
Yeah.
Companies in our industry are not headcount heavy to begin with, but very much focused on figuring out how to bend the curve.
But so, I mean, 300 now, I mean, are 3 years from now, is it 400, 500? Is it flat?
Probably. If it was up to me, if we actually use AI effectively, I think it shouldn't be growing more than 15 to 20%.
15
Even
to
though
20%.
our aspirations as a business are to grow far greater than that. So I think you start to see that efficiency with AI.
And so you're saying that you won't be hiring as quickly as you use AI in the organization.
As long as we're effective in deploying AI, just like
Right.
all those issues I described for everybody
Right.
else, we have to
Right.
go through the same challenges. Yeah.
So, one of the other parts I wanted to ask you about is, coming back to the news of this week, right? We're seeing a lot of investment in capacity and compute. And, there's a lot of money flowing around. And one of the things that you mentioned, you were on CNBC yesterday, you talked about sort of the bumpy period that could come up as a result of all this investment in capacity and the likelihood that in a few years, we might be in a place where we've overinvested, we have overcapacity, and there might be some problems that come with that. What exactly is this bumpy period that you were referring to? Talk about that.
Look, I think we went through this with the CLEX when we were putting the telecommunications infrastructure in place as well. The reality is, when you have companies trying to go own a market, they will over provision the infrastructure they want from their vendors. So if you think about the clouds today and the amount of data center capacity they're provisioning for and energy capacity, they will over provision because they don't really know how that sector is going to scale up to meet their needs.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd rather these are not all deeply committed contracts, but the infrastructure
Right.
that's getting built. So I think in some cases I've heard there's 2 to 3x more over provisioning in some of the hyperscaler plans. And so if that's indeed happening, then there's going to be a period where we're overbuilt, you'll see some of those infrastructure investments not go very well, but over time same thing's going to happen with the computer infrastructure that happened with the internet infrastructure that will grow into it because there's long term obviously what's getting built today will get dwarfed in the context of what we'll have 20 years from now. But there
Right.
will be this period in 3 to 5 years where we'll feel like, gosh, there's an oversupply of compute infra because the industry as a whole over provisioned. It's hard for me to not imagine that scenario.
So okay, so let's dive into that scenario though. So in this 3 to 5 years from now, let's say we have all this compute that isn't getting used because we built all of it. Who gets hurt there?
I think there's a lot of infrastructure capital going in there. There's a lot of data center development companies that are popping up. There's a whole industry that's popping up around this, and I think those companies will to effectively navigate that period from a viability standpoint.
So
This movie has played out before.
right, and I mean, I'm just trying to understand here. I mean, who should be most worried about this? Sounds like it's the companies developing these data centers, who
Absolutely.
should be most worried about it. What about what I mean? The big tech companies, look, they can afford, or they have ways of affording, some of this investment. What about startups in this bumpy period? What happens to that?
Yeah, look, I think the startups, look, the whole infrastructure industry that's coming up because is the one that has to navigate how that infrastructure drives utilization, to justify the investments that are getting made. I think for startups, it's that issue isn't so pronounced. I think they will go provision capacity, they'll rent capacity that they need in the context of their business to slowly grow into it. I think it's more the infrastructure companies that are provisioning for these large hyperscalers and labs. And then, what's the actual demand going to be in the end? You don't really know.
Let's talk about sort of projecting, this idea of over provisioning or building over capacity, as you said. And this is not the first time we've seen it. I mean, one sort of question I have is, why do you have to build over capacity in the first place? And the second thing is, why don't you just narrow your ambitions a little bit? Instead of building capacity for all of AI, why not stick to sort of one particular space of AI, like healthcare, for example, where we know that the use case might be a little bit more proven out. How do you think about that?
Look, I don't think the technology company is going to marginalize their ambition in that regard. I think it's much more if you're a hyperscaler today, you just don't know how this infrastructure set of companies their ability to deliver. So you're just sort of over provisioning, not because you will overspend in the end, but it's because you want to make sure you have the compute that you need to really meet your needs. The idea that you'll see these industry specific models come up on top and provide solutions that are vertical solutions, that's already happening, right? I mean, we incubated Hippocratic AI,
right.
We've done physics, X, and industrial. There's a lot of these companies that are already starting to sort of leverage the models and then build on top of them solutions that are suited for those industries. Going back to my framework of the 4 things for enterprise transformation, I think that's naturally happening, and that to me is in some ways the best places for the AI talent in the startup world to go tackle, because those are somewhat more tractable problems to build a company around from scratch.
Right. And what about the environmental costs that would come with building this overcapacity, as you say?
Look, I think if you think about the AI compute opportunity, it bootstraps heavily to the energy opportunity.
Right.
And the trade-off you have there is, in the short term, if we're going to win in AI, you actually don't have an option but to lean into natural gas as the most abundant resource. That's really what we've got the most of in a lot of ways. And obviously, in the 10 to 20 year period, you want to see the renewable infrastructure with baseload solar really scaling to take a lot of the natural gas energy workload, from a scaling perspective. And long term, obviously, we have these moonshots with fission and fusion that folks are working on. We're invested in Pacific Fusion in that regard. But that to me is, could that make a difference in 20 years? So I think there's like today, can we use natural gas as cleanly as possible? Medium term, can we really get renewables at scale in a reliable way for this industry? And long term, can we drive energy abundance with nuclear? I mean, that to me is the framework.
So when you say that the AI opportunity is the energy opportunity, I mean, do you see yourself increasingly investing in energy startups? Could you see yourself setting up an energy fund in the future? Well, what would that mean for your business?
We're heavily looking into it, and I've invested in the
into an energy fund?
No. I've invested in the clean tech 1.0 era very unsuccessfully, and sort of have a lot of learnings from there. So I think to me, and we've started to do some investments in that space. As I mentioned, Pacific Fusion's example of that. Fourier is another one that's a hydrogen generation company, on-site generation of hydrogen. So there are solutions we're going to slowly invest in, but the act of company building and scaling those is still a new art from my standpoint. So we're being careful in how we move. And I do think if we think comprehensively and take a step back, the opportunity is as much about can you create the right technology solutions as it is about what is the roadmap for scaling the infrastructure
Yeah.
so that it meets the needs of computers. So we're taking a step back and really comprehensively looking at it and see how do we help founders tackle that space.
Right. What do you make of the current policy in the U.S.? I mean, you talked about renewables, right? We've seen this sort of rollback on a lot of clean energy initiatives in the U.S. How do you square that with your comment that there's a lot of opportunity in the renewable space and in clean
Yeah.
energy?
Look, first of all, my framework for advanced energy that really will get deployed at scale is got to be clean, affordable, secure. It can't be just clean, but then expensive. And I do think we need to use this new demand to drive towards sustainability. So I do believe in that. But in the short term, if the U.S. is faced with the choice of be environmentally friendly or win AI, which I think is really the choice that's in front of us. I think the cost of missing AI is too large to make that trade-off. And that's really what's happening here. If you think about most of the growth in the US, most of the investment, it's all, the United States is making an enormous bet on artificial intelligence, like a venture bet we're making in what creates our next phase of prosperity when you really think about everything that's going on as a
Right.
country. It's exciting and it's scary, just like investing in a high risk venture capital project. And so in order to really make that come to bear, you need energy, and so you're not going to slow it down. So I can see why the administration is rolling a lot of the regulations back. But I do think in the long term, if we're not while winning AI, also making investments so that long term we do have this clean, affordable, secure infrastructure. In the end, we're not going to win in the long term because there is a cost to carbon in my view, and I do believe in sustainability matters. And so, kind of, how do we make those short-term, long-term choices very intentionally? At least we're using that framework to guide our own investment strategy into space.
So I just want to understand this. So you're saying these policy rollbacks with clean energy. Your stance on it is you said you could see why they're doing it. So are you saying that you're okay with it because we'll have to worry about in the environment in the long run? Is that what you're saying?
No. Look, my own view is that we should not lose momentum on sustainability.
Right.
But I think because the rest of the world follows us as well, and I do think it's going to slow things down. But I understand why that's happening, and I'm sort of looking at the environment, thinking if that's what it's going to be, how do we make sure we focus on the short term, win in AI that we need? I'm sort of putting my being an American hat on for a second, but in a way that we're also investing in this infrastructure that is economical, because it's got to be economical for it to be used at scale. And the good news is we have so much demand in energy that when you have new demand, you can absorb innovation.
Yeah.
And so can we intelligently create a energy transition roadmap for the country that also allows you to win in AI and make those trade-offs? I think that's a lot of the way I think about our investment strategy in this space.
Hmm. And before we talk, I want to talk about Anthropic, which you guys have a large position in. China is pulling ahead in renewables. What do you think that means for us?
So look, I think we underestimate China in a lot of ways. I don't think they're that behind in AI. I think they're going to be very pragmatic in the way they catch up in the chips race. You've seen the Huawei announcements, for example, and they're very far ahead in energy. I mean, a while back, I used to say they're building a coal plant a week, but they're also doing the largest deployment of renewable. So I think they're actually getting these technologies all to a point of viability where the energy advantage will also give them an AI advantage. So this is one of the reasons I'm saying, like, we can't lose sight of the fact that we need to create these new sources of energy and enable them at scale in the US, is because in the long term, if we're going to win AI, we do need that transition. We are going to run out of gas. And so we have to make those investments today, and why I think it's important, for our industry to be backing, founders in that as exciting as all the focus is on AI infrastructure, and that's where we're focused as well. I think it's very important to have some of your attention on getting this ecosystem to be scalable, affordable.
I want to talk about Anthropic. So, we've seen OpenAI now coming out very loudly saying, we are going to build our own capacity and we're going to throw a lot of resources at, at investing in data centers. Does that kind of up the ante for Anthropic? I mean, do they need to be doing the same thing here and investing in capacity to the same extent?
Look, one thing I'm very impressed with Dario and the overall team at Anthropic is that they're very focused. They actually don't pay much attention to what others are doing. They have a lot of confidence in their own strategy. I think they've been very capital efficient. If you think about the amount of enterprise value they've created in terms of the capital they've spent, the surgical sort of investments they've made in the products that they care about. So I don't think they will be influenced by what others are doing. So if they decide to do it, they've got their own capital. I think that's a team that's very much a independent thinker and at peace with their own strategy and their own values. And I admire that about them. I think they're executing very well.
So you don't think they're going to move into building their own data centers in the near future? How do they keep up with their own compute needs then?
I didn't say that. I'm just saying I think if they think they need it, then they'll build it. But
Okay.
but they're just not going to react to what others are doing. Is my only point.
So did you see that coming in the next year?
Let's see. I mean, I'd let them dive. I want to be respectful. Let them dive,
Okay.
talk about what they want to expose strategically.
Right. I'm just trying to wrap my head around. We see one giant pursuing this strategy. I can only imagine what that would mean for another. But I take your point that you want to focus on your own game. Let's talk about General Catalyst. This is such an exciting time for the company and the firm. What is the strategy behind all these expansions into buying a hospital chain and moving into wealth management? Just talk about what you're trying to do here with this strategy.
Yeah. Look, our true north is to help founders build enduring companies, right? Companies that are market leaders and are scaling and compounding for a long time. So one way to look at it, everything that you see coming out of GC is, what is that doing to GC, the business? But the more important way to look at it is to say, how does everything enable a core advantage for the founders that we back?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, when we focus on a deep and sincere effort in building the best relationships with, ambitious people around the world, our familia, as we call it, that catalyzes opportunity for our founders. If you think about all the innovations we've done in our capital stack, that's because we think as technology company building matures and goes and scales, the innovation required in our industry is not at the three axes of stage, sector, and geography in terms of equity funds, which is what the industry has traditionally done.
Right.
It needs more capital solutions like our customer value fund we created for funding sales and marketing, and our creation fund for funding a lot of the inorganic and the roll-up work, as we've talked about in the past. So that's the capital innovation for the founders. If you look at buying a hospital, if you look at some of the other things that we're doing there, or you look at our the General Catalyst Institute, is to help make the founders be more effective at engaging with governments and policy, or having access to distribution. What's going to happen with our 23 health insurance partners that we're working with on their transformation? It's an opportunity for our companies, our founders, to go be part of an ecosystem that can drive that transformation in these complex industries, really act as a system. So that's the distribution advantage that, all those things. So every time you hear something that sounds nutty, go back to how does this really support the founders for that GC backs?
So all of this is to give you more knowledge, more tools for
more unfair advantage for our founders.
For the founders. Okay, got it. So, as GC sort of spreads its wings a bit, I have to ask the question. It's come up time and time again.
We're not. We're not. We're not. You should not. No need to ask.
You didn't even let me ask the question. Okay, well, I got it. So GC is not interested in going public.
GC is not going public.
Okay. What about Andreessen Horowitz? Do you see that happening?
I think you have to ask them. They're an amazing team, and you should ask them.
Do you think it happens?
I actually don't know. I really honestly don't know. I don't know, and I don't have an opinion. Yeah.
The broader question I have here is, this idea of venture funds going public. Let's just broaden it out. I mean, do you see any venture firm going public in the next 3 years? Do you even think that makes sense? In sort of this next phase of venture capital that we're on?
Look, I think so. Let's think about it from first principles. If somebody is going to uh, uh, go public, because this happened in PE. I think platforms have been created and they do go public. So I think, could somebody go public? Yes. Is somebody going to go public in the next 3 years? The most well positioned probably is our friends at Andreessen Horowitz, but you'd have to ask them. I've never had that conversation with them. No idea.
Right.
And it certainly is not going to be us. I'll tell you that. So it's just not our priority. Like we're
Right.
really trying to innovate in going back to the peak ambiguity. So we're really figuring out what are all the unfair advantages we can create for our founders to come out of this peak ambiguity with scale and success. That's ultimately what's driving our innovation roadmap.
I mean, this whole notion of venture capital firms becoming more like PE firms. What do you think of that comparison?
I think it's it never makes sense to me. And I'll tell you why. Why would we want to be like PE firms? The best companies, the biggest companies, the most profitable companies are in the venture capital portfolio, not in the PE portfolios. And the companies that are the most resilient and relevant for the future are in the venture portfolio, not in the PE portfolios. They all have to go through transformation. We're actually helping a lot of the companies in the PE portfolios become viable with a lot of the enterprise transformation stuff we talked about. So why would we go down that path? I think there's this obsession with does scale really mean you're going to raise bigger funds and therefore you have to do these bigger deals, which means you become PE. I just think it's the old way of thinking about stuff because, if you believe in the AI transformation, then you're way better off staying at the forefront of innovation. And
I think maybe where that comes from is, people saying venture funds getting so big, the companies that they're invested in getting so big, right? And then you have even,
doesn't mean that means we're going to turn it into PE. Why can't venture just be bigger than PE? Because of the opportunity so large in the context of the future versus the past.
Right. Couple questions here for you quickly before we let you go. There's been reports that Stripe is buying shares from investors. Are you selling?
I just saw that. We have invested 14 times. And if you think about it, in the last round that they had raised from the outside, we wrote a very large check. It was in the $50 billion round.
Yeah.
And, we've tried to ask our investors many times, our LPs, to see if, hey, would you like us to create liquidity? And almost always they've said no. So I think, my hope is that we are investors in Stripe for a very, very long time. So I think this company is going to steadily compound. It's got more and more important role in society. It's done amazing work when it comes to the technological shifts with AI.
Right. You've said you see it becoming a $1 trillion company, I think.
So then that should be your answer.
Right. I just want to come back to the land of seed very quickly because, I know that seed investing is sort of the bread and butter that General Catalyst is really built on. As a seed investor, I think we have a lot of venture capitalists watching this show, a lot of early venture capitalists, a lot of people starting seed. As it relates to seed investing, what is the second most important question that you ask every founder when you meet with them when you're diligencing their business?
Depends on what you think what the first one is.
That's why I asked what the second is.
Yeah. Look, I think first of all,
give me your top two. Your top two.
I'll give you. So first of all, why we're doing this. So we've gone and brought on 3 partners. Yuri, who built Wayfinder in Silicon Valley, Jeanette built La Familia in Europe, and Neeraj, who built Venture Hive in India, because those are the 3 markets we operate in. And we basically told them, you guys are the stewards of the early stage activity, which is seed. And the cultural shift we have to work on to have a multi-stage firm do as seed as well as a seed-focused firm is the following: is to understand culturally that the ownership that you get in the company and the trust you get in the company early on is way more valuable, even if it's a $2 million check, than a $100 million check, $200 million check later on in a company that's already working really well. And so that's what gives you the agency to go do the rest of everything we do. So we are very heavy on getting seed right. Okay. And the questions we ask, there's only 2 things you're looking for. Is the founder really excellent, which I think is the first question you're really talking about, because that's what you have to get to. And I think you want to look at why they built that business. The question that I always ask is, why did you start this company? Because that moment, where an amazing person flips over to say, I'm going to go take on a problem, is very telling. I just want to understand what's driving this, because that moment is the source of inspiration for capital, for talent, for customers, for the next 10 to 20 years, that they're going to build an iconic company.
So the first question is, who are you? And the second question is, why'd you start this business? Okay. What's a good answer and what's a bad answer for why'd you start this business?
A truthful answer is a good answer, and we get
as journalists too, by the way.
we get pretty good at knowing when stories are made up. I think it's got to be authentic, and that's really what you're looking for. And by the way, I started a company when I left grad school, and I had a terrible answer to it. I was just doing it; everybody else around me was doing it, and that certainly didn't go very far. It's just you want to see the authenticity around what's motivating somebody intrinsically, or what they see in the world that's compelling.
Right. Hemant, I want to thank you so much for coming on. Stick with me for 1 minute, if you will. I just want to go. We have 1 minute left. Just want to go back to your thing that you said a lot, which is the AI opportunity is the energy opportunity. And I just want to make sure I really understand this, because when you say the AI opportunity is the energy opportunity, you talked about what it could mean. Who is paying for this energy? What exactly is the opportunity? I just want to make sure that I understand that, because I think it's an interesting point, but I want to try.
I was with the CEO of one of the largest utilities in the US. Okay. And here's what they told me. They told me, for the last 40 years, we've grown 1 to 2% a year, essentially with inflation, right? And in the rest of this decade, we're going to have to grow 8% a year.
Right.
The demand is coming. And next decade, 12% a year.
12%, right.
You're talking about one of the biggest sectors. And I think that opportunity, getting that infrastructure built the right way, and actually built in a way that we take advantage of the resources we have that are not going to be around forever, and investing in technologies that will eventually drive abundance around energy.
Right.
And getting that transition
Who's doing the spending? It's the data center companies that are doing
the data center companies are doing the spending. They're going to acquire power, but like utilities have to make the infrastructure. I think there's going to be new businesses that are getting into power development. I think that are going to be interesting.
Okay.
I think this whole infrastructure space, folks will do really good systems optimizations around how you drive, all the way from, let's say, methane to bids. How do you really drive that? I think it's going to be really interesting too.
And the circularity of the data center AI cloud ecosystem, the circularity of all this money, it doesn't concern you?
Listen, I've said this before. Bubbles are really good. They mobilize capital and talent into an important area, but you'll see some carnage. But what you're going to see on the other side is real value creation. And as I said, the only way to wrap your head around the staggering amounts of dollars being invested is this is not going after IT budgets. This is going after your workforce budgets, your labor budgets. And those are big enough to support the kind of investment that we're making. Causes other problems in society. We got to talk about reskilling, but that's the opportunity that's driving this.
Okay. Well, Hemant, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's always funny when people know what I'm going to ask before I ask it. And congratulations on the new book as well. We didn't get to talk about that, but your new book is out this week. Hemant Taneja is the CEO of General Catalyst. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We look forward to having you back very soon.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, our next segment is with one of our sponsors supporting us on this production. Atlassian has been doing some interesting work to try to figure out how AI can be used not just to improve individual productivity, but also efficiency among teams. It turns out that is a harder job than you might think. I want to bring on Jamil Valliani, a vice president at Atlassian and the head of AI product, to talk about how he thinks about this issue and also some of the solutions that he sees being helpful. We recorded this segment last night, and I want to play it for you right now. Here is my conversation with Jamil from Atlassian. Jamil, welcome to TITV. It's great to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Akash.
So you put out this great report that talked about how AI is helping individuals with their productivity. But the finding that most interested me was that teams themselves aren't seeing as much of the benefit. So I want to dig into some of the data that you found. Tell us about what your report, what it found.
For sure. Happy to. So, Akash, we are a company rooted in teamwork. So we take a lot of time surveying the world's biggest companies, their leaders, and the thousands upon thousands of employees that work at those companies every day. And what they've told us is that on the average, they feel individually 33% more productive. And I think we all have personal examples where we feel like AI has helped us do things faster. But when we look at what the leaders are reporting, like how are they feeling their team's progress and their transformation, only 3% of them feel their teams have truly transformed in how much they can get done. And in fact, 37% of these leaders are saying that all these AI tools together are not at all transforming their teams, but in fact causing them to regress a bit or go in the wrong way.
Huh.
There's this interesting dissonance, and we're trying to work to get to the root of that and solve those problems.
So you have people saying, hey, I use these tools and I'm seeing benefit. They're making me more productive. You have team leaders and you have the heads of these organizations saying, well, we're not necessarily seeing that in our organizations. Why do you think that's the case?
So as we probed, we found that a lot of folks are using these tools to become so much more productive. They're producing lots more information on their own, but then they don't really have a good way to contribute back and orchestrate the work as a team. So I think we've all kind of felt this where when people got email, for example, it was really great initially to say, oh yeah, I can send emails quickly, but then you got this information overload and it got really difficult to sew and work through all that. And we had to develop mechanisms. And that's what the kind of challenge we're trying to find here.
It's almost like content overload. It's I think about like, well, where do I even put my attention if I'm getting 10 emails now instead of 3?
Exactly. And we're finding that, this actually is having a real dollar cost issue, ROI impact. We think that about $100 billion of lost ROI is happening because of this sort of dissonance between individual productivity gain, but team productivity loss.
Okay.
That's a pretty massive problem.
So that's a big problem. $100 billion. I mean, that could take you a long way. And I know we're talking about aggregate numbers here, but then I guess my question is, how do we get teams to work better with AI? How do you sort of get that individual efficiency to work better at the team level?
Absolutely. So I think this really reminds me of the times when we were getting new technology into the workplace, like video conferencing or even PCs and internet for the first time. There's this period where everyone's kind of learning the new etiquette and the new best practices of how to actually plug in these benefits while helping the team move forward. And we found there were a few pretty consistent themes. The first was making sure that everyone has a shared knowledge base that they're constantly working from and contributing to. The second was making sure that AI is in a position where it can orchestrate the work rather than just like producing it and then letting you go and actually manage what to do next. And the third was really treating AI as a team member that you have assign it clear responsibilities and expect clear things from, just like every team member knows their role. Same thing with AI.
So these are some great principles. Let's talk about sort of some tactical examples. Have you seen customers implement ways to accelerate this sort of etiquette building that you talk about with AI? Have you found ways in your own company to accelerate etiquette, put in place rules? What does that look like on the ground?
Yeah, for sure. So we've got customers ranging from like 24-hour fitness, HarperCollins, Royal Caribbean. It's a pretty wide spectrum of customers who have successfully started this sort of like etiquette building, best practice building in the new era. A couple of examples that have come up have been really when AI has been started to or being thought of as a member of the team. So as an example, there are a number of our customers, for example, one in the healthcare industry that actually have a regular process where they are working through having issues tracked in Jira, right? They just have the work log back plan there. Those issues get finished, and then they say, okay, now we have to go and translate that into release notes, and then those release notes go into then get translated even further into a small publicly available advertisement or promotion of the release, and then there's an authorization for release that gets filed to December, right? This long process,
Right.
and they have been using agents to go and say, hey, let's go and actually streamline that workflow. And then also make sure that it's not like, oh, the human now has to go and just push from one to the next, but is actually orchestrating that entire process so that the humans are able to go and add their value and authorize things, but then also not worry about trying to handle the mechanics of moving these along.
And so I want to bring this example back to this idea of AI etiquette. What exactly is the etiquette then that they sort of established with AI to sort of make all that work faster?
Yeah, so I think in each one of those steps I described, the team thought about, well, hey, like, that was somebody whose job it was on top of their normal day job, right? To go in and do that. What are the best practices that they had for that particular process? And they would often go and say, okay, let me go and write that down, right? And then I will document that in our knowledge base, in our knowledge repository, and make sure that the AI is aware of that. They can actually draw on that as context. So this act of actually, spending a few minutes to actually describe to the AI, hey, like, this is the best way to go do X. This is what my team expects. This is the best way to hand these things off. And then trying out that agent, making sure it works pretty well, is one of the key steps that we see. And we find that as people, get more and more thoughtful about, say, hey, let me go and first try having my agent help with this or do a part of this, and then investing a little bit of time to make it better and better and better, pays off in dividends actually within just a matter of days. And you do this already, like whenever you maybe go on vacation or you go on leave, you already have to write things down for somebody else to help carry on. So it's not that much different from what a person might normally do for that scenario. But they have to now start getting into the act of saying, oh, like, I'm actually going to do the same thing so that the AIs can help me with these more menial and managerial type tasks.
And do you guys have like AI etiquette rules at Atlassian that you yourself are using that you found helpful to help your own teams become more effective?
Yeah, we're forming them all the time. One of the things that's actually happening is that our own leaders are getting very involved and actually creating Slack channels, for example, where they're saying, "Hey, we're going to go and learn together how we do prototyping, for example, in the new AI forward way." And so we'll actually all storm together and say, "Okay, like, here's maybe 3 or 4 common prototyping tasks. We're going to try out these tools. We're going to learn and figure out what works best, what doesn't work best, and then codify all that into like a set of learnings and even record videos so that other folks can learn." And we find that with every sort of function, every practice, there's a set of like, unique etiquette and things like that you have to build and muscles you have to build. And we're starting to capture all that together and then train others and sort of have, viral means where we go and pass that around the organization.
Last question for you. I mean, I've been so excited by Atlassian's acquisition strategy. We've talked about it here on the show. And I'm wondering, if these findings in this report, the idea that teams, need a little bit more help insofar as making AI work for them, the idea of drawing on different sources of information as a way of establishing AI etiquette, do you see those things reflected in the company's own acquisition strategy or maybe the AI ambitions at large?
Absolutely. So you can look at just this past week with DX. DX is solving this really challenging problem for people who build software. There's a lot of expectation that AI is transforming software building teams, and a lot of engineering managers and leaders don't know. Well, okay, how is it really working? Like, and where do I need to go and focus on building this muscle or etiquette in this long process of software building? And DX does a marvelous job of really shining light on that process, where the improvement opportunities are, and helping those leaders, with their teams make those improvements.
Right.
And with the browser company, I think if you look back at just browsers for the last 20 years, they've been really optimized around this, serving this machine that is much more around content consumption, advertising different businesses, search driven businesses. Like that's what they're there for. That's what they're optimized for, and they do a marvelous job. But nobody ever looked at a browser before and said, "How do I go and make this thing optimized for a knowledge worker, somebody who uses dozens of tools every day to manage work, to manage knowledge, to coordinate across teams, across customers." And if you really thought about how to design a browser that was really good at that, you'd probably wind up with a very different set of design choices. And we're excited that the browser will help us go and consider that.
Great. Well, Jamil, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a fascinating report, and also, I will say, look, if it's just a few percent of teams are finding that AI is effective for them, it really only leaves room to grow. And so, I like this idea of AI etiquette and the idea that maybe teams got to set some rules and norms in place. I'll be sure to try that ourselves. Jamil, thank you so much. That is Jamil Valliani, the VP and Head of AI Product at Atlassian. Thank you for being with us here.
Thank you so much, Akash. We're looking forward to sharing more in the months ahead.
That was my conversation with Jamil from Atlassian. Okay, well, that does it for today's show. A reminder, we are live on this stream Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I want to thank Amazon Web Services, who is our presenting sponsor for this production. And I want to thank you for tuning in. We really do appreciate your viewership. I'm already excited for our next show tomorrow. And so until then, bye-bye for now.